Hi, in this video I'm going to be showing you how to install and configure Microsoft SQL Server 2025 using always-on configuration. Obviously SQL 2025 has not been officially launched yet, but I am doing a lot of testing on the features regarding this latest version of SQL that is coming out. And I figured since I'm going to be doing it, I might as well record everything that's going on. So the first thing I normally do when a new version of SQL Server comes out is I create a virtual environment with the configurations that I usually encounter. And then I play around with different scenarios like, heavy OLTP transactions, failover scenarios, not a lot of cloud stuff, mainly because cloud I usually prefer to be completely on cloud or on premise. Hybrid situations are very rare that I encounter it. So yeah, the goal here is to kind of set up my lab, so to speak. And what I would have normally done previously was use Hyper-V, but I figured that there is something that you should probably be aware of, and that is you don't need Hyper-V. You can use VMWare, which is available for free, and it works with any operating system with any configuration. So you could be using Windows Home, you could be using an older version of Windows, and it wouldn't matter. You'd still be able to use VMware. So I've kind of switched from using Hyper-V to VMware, so that's what I'll be using over here. As far as setting up the virtual machine is concerned, the steps are pretty much the same. It's not very complicated. So let's get started. So what I've done here is I've already gone ahead and created a blank virtual machine, which I'm going to be using as my Active Directory. I will explain the infrastructure part of it later, but for now what I'm doing is just installing the operating system and getting the basic stuff out of the way. So as you can see here, when I configure this VM, I haven't installed the operating system as yet. So it'll just boot into the BIOS and then it'll just throw an error, right? So I've basically just got an empty hardware setup, so to speak, right? So first thing I'll do is I'll go into removable devices, go to CD, and then I'll say connect. I would obviously need to go ahead and make sure that there is the installer inside the CD. So let me go ahead and do that. So I'm going to say connected, connect at power on, use the ISO image, and in my case the ISO image is in sorry, just a second, virtual machine installers, and I'm using Windows Server 2022 if I remember correctly. All right, so go ahead, press OK, yeah, and then restart the VM, and when it does, I should be getting a screen saying press any key to start. So I pressed it, and now we'll go through the installer process. Again, here for the Active Directory, what I'm going to do is I'm going to provision a less powerful system, because a lot of the work that I'm doing is not on Active Directory. It's going to be on the actual SQL Server instances. I'm going to stick with the defaults for now. It shouldn't really matter. You can configure it however you need to when you are installing your own lab, right? The idea here is that the Active Directory is just something that we need because we need to go ahead and establish permissions and networking, and we also need to go ahead and have one drive that we can use for quorum. So that's why I'm going to go ahead and configure Active Directory separately. In this case, I'm using Windows Server 2022 Standard Evaluation Edition Desktop. All right. So just a second. Accept, next, and then choose custom installation, because this is a virtual machine, so the file system has not been configured correctly. You can see it's unallocated. I'm going to click new. I'm going to say apply. Additional Windows partitions will be created. You can see that over here. So I'm setting this up for 40 gigabytes, right? Press next, and everything should get installed in a minute. And with that, my Active Directory should be ready. So I'm going to pause the video over here right now and come back when the installation is complete, and we can move on to the next steps after that. Almost done with getting the files for installation. So after that, we will be installing the features. A lot of the stuff that I'm doing is basically just going to be the defaults, because the focus of this lab is not really Windows configuration. It is SQL Server 2025. So that's what I will actually want to be focusing on. And you can see that it's saying restart. So let's go ahead and do that. And after restart, I need to go ahead and enter the username and password for the administrator and stuff. So we'll go ahead and do that in a minute. And there we go. So let me go ahead and type in the password over here. Okay, and let's log in. Okay, just a second. Right, so the next thing I need to do is go ahead and configure IP addresses and stuff. So for that, I'll go into control panel and I will choose network. I will choose view network status, go into my Ethernet, go into properties, and under properties, choose TCP IP protocol 4. Go into properties over there and assign a static IP. All right, so here the static IP I'm going to assign is, just a second. All right, so it's going to be 10.10. Just a second. Actually, you know what? 10.0.0.1 should be fine. Right, and the DNS is going to be loopback, so that's going to be 127.0.0.1. Okay, you probably want to check loopback IP address. It's basically the IP address that is used for pinging your own local machine, basically. Right, obviously the Microsoft stuff gets in the way. So loop back IP address, the idea here is that the Active Directory becomes your first entry point into your the Active Directory becomes your first entry point into the network, right? Because you can't enter into something unless your permissions are defined. So that's why the loopback IP address is given to the Active Directory. That becomes like the entry point. That's like your local, not local exactly, but you know, that's like, that doesn't have anything further up above it. So that's why we use the loopback IP address of 127.0.0.1. So just let me go ahead and show you one more time this configuration. I've got 10.0.0.1. I've got a DNS, I've got a subnet mask, and default gateway doesn't really matter at this point. That's mainly for internet access and stuff like that. Not really something that I'm worried about at the moment. And then we have the DNS server, right? So that takes care of that. And with that done, there is one thing that's an extra step that I have to do over here right now, which is install VMware tools. It just makes it easier for me to kind of use this particular virtual machine with what I have going on right now. Right, so I'm just going to install that. Right. This is not really related to SQL Server setup. It's more about just making it easier to work with VMware. Right, so keyboard inputs, copy paste, commands, you know, screen resolutions, all those things just get a little bit better when we use these additional tools with the virtual machine. So just give it a second while it does that. And it requires a restart, and you can see as soon as the tools are installed, my screen resolution improves a lot better. Right, so I'm going to go ahead and say no to this right now, and because I need to go ahead and do some more other installations, I might as well just do everything and restart later. I'm going to go ahead and install Active Directory now. So I'm going to go into the Server Manager, and under Server Manager I'm going to click Manage, Add Roles, press Next, choose Role-Based and Feature-Based Installation. Server from the same server pool, there's really only just the one right now. And here, before I do the step, I just realized that the name of my machine isn't really very user-friendly. So I'm going to go ahead and change the name of this machine. Right, so you can see I rename this PC. I'm going to just call this Active Directory. And this will also require a restart, so might as well now do the restart for both of these things together. And the reason I'm doing it now is because with the name of the machine changed, that will be the new name that the Active Directory will store and refer to going forward for things like name resolution, etc. So it's kind of important that you do this step of renaming the PC with the appropriate name before you install the Active Directory. All right, so that's taken care of. Let me just go ahead and close all of this and then just do a restart, and we'll get back after the restart. Okay, so we are back after the restart. Let's get right into it. Let me log back in. And now I will go ahead and install Active Directory services. So let's go ahead and do that. There we go. Role-based or feature-based installation. Use this Active Directory. And here, the one that I actually want is this one here, the one that says Active Directory Domain Services. Some of these things cannot be merged with others. For example, if you install Active Directory Certificate Services, then Domain Services cannot be installed on the same machine. There are some limitations, like not limitations exactly, it's kind of designed that way. But yeah, so the one that we really need for our SQL Server lab is Active Directory Domain Services. So I'm going to go ahead and select that, press next. Rest of it not really relevant. Now we do clustering, but then we don't need clustering on the Active Directory for SQL Server. As part of Active Directory installation, usually Active Directory is clustered just so that, you know, if one machine goes down, your domain doesn't go down. But that's not the priority over here, so we're going to leave it as it is, right? Again, defaults everywhere. Probably one thing that I want to check, yeah, okay, web server is not checked, so that's okay. Web server is the one that we use to host websites. Right, so anyways, coming back here, now we get into the steps of configuring Active Directory itself. So you can see here's some basic introduction stuff. Restart destination automatically, yes, and then install. So this is going to go ahead and install the features, after which we need to go ahead and configure them. This step takes a few minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and pause the video, and once it's done, there will be a restart, and we'll get into configuration. Okay, so it's installed. Time for a restart. So let's go ahead. Actually, you know what? Let's finish the configuration and then we'll just do the restart. All right, so if I go over here right now, I've got my Active Directory Administrator Services. Okay, just a second. I need to go into Configuration Manager and then configure the Active Directory. So hold on a second. Let it just finish refreshing, and you'll see there's a yellow triangle over here, notification saying that promote the server to a domain controller, which is basically the step of configuring it. So I'm going to go ahead and click promote, and I'm creating a new domain with new everything. So I will just be simply choosing add a new forest. It's kind of like a forest with trees, right? So you have a network which have different types of trees in it, or computers in it, and that's what this is about. I'm going to say SQL 2025 lab.com. Right, so domain name obviously needs to look like a domain name, so I'm just going to go ahead and say SQL 2025 lab, so it's absolutely clear what's inside of this. Your company would probably have a different standard that they want to use, but that's what I'm using for now. Press next. Again, you can see a functional level 2016. That's kind of like the minimum compatibility level that you want it to be working with. Again, here we have to configure a password, so let me just go ahead and do that. Obviously you need to make sure that this one is checked. This is kind of important, right? It's how everybody will be able to recognize each other using their names rather than IP addresses. It'll be relevant when we do SQL Server configuration. Create DNS delegation, not really required, so we can skip it. It'll go ahead and use the name that we have right now, and using that name it'll configure. Right, so we have the computer name like I mentioned earlier, so I've gone ahead and just put in the it basically detects the computer name that I already have, and that's what's available here. So we're just gonna go stick with that for the moment. I'm gonna press next, and yeah, the idea here is that a lot of this is just the defaults. You don't really have to do much, correct? Maybe just type in a password wherever it requires you to. But when it's done, what we're going to be having is a completely set up Active Directory, and this would basically be the kind of thing that you would then add all the other computers on your network into, right? So some kind of prerequisite checks, some suggestions about like how you can go ahead and set up or configure this. Yeah, so again here, DNS delegation cannot be created because authoritative parent zone cannot be found, and it does not run Windows DNS, blah blah blah, right? So if you're integrating with an existing DNS, which we are not, you should manually create a delegation for this, right? So that's basically saying that if you want this guy to talk to another network, you would probably need to add additional settings, but this is going to be a standalone network for us, so we don't really care, right? Gonna go ahead, press install, right? Again, some kind of warnings about weaker algorithms being used for encryption. Again, not the focus of SQL Server Labs, so not going to get into the details of this for now. Let's just go ahead with setting up the Active Directory. Again, this takes a few minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and pause the video and come back when it's done. As you can see, it's installed. Now we need to go ahead and restart. So it's going to go ahead and do that. Let me just help it along the way and just do the, okay, there we go. It's restarting. Yeah, so with this, what we have right now is we have an Active Directory, but just having an Active Directory on its own isn't really enough. We also need users within the Active Directory, which will have permissions to add other computers on the domain. So we will now create an account and grant that account Active Directory administrator permissions. And the idea here is that when we finish setting up SQL Server nodes, primary and secondary, we will be logging in to those nodes using these domain accounts, because that's how the domain knows that these are computers that need to be part of the domain's network. Right. So let's give it a minute. Just restarting. Back after the restart, I'm going to go ahead. You can see here that it's got the name and administrator, etc. over here. Correct. So the next thing we want to do, like I mentioned earlier, is that we want to go ahead and add a user. So for that, we'll go into administrator tools over here, right? Active Directory users and computers. And in here, you can see we've got users, we've got built-in permissions. So these are all the different types of permissions. And what we really want to do is we want to create a user who belongs in this group here called domain admins, right? So I'm going to go ahead and click here, say new. I'm going to say user. I'm just going to call this guy SQL and his DBA. And it's going to be SQL.dba, right? So that's the username that we will be using to log in, right? Create a password. Normally the SQL DBA wouldn't be given any permissions on the Active Directory, but like I mentioned, this is for my lab, so not really too worried about the password being used for domain admins over here. Now in domain admins, as you can see, I go into domain admins over here and I make this new user that I've just created a member of this administrator group for domain admins over here. So SQL.dba is now a member of the domain administrators, which means that he can pretty much add anyone to the domain or remove anyone from the domain, which is kind of important because we want to add SQL Server clusters or primary and secondary replicas into this domain later on. So I now have an account, I have an Active Directory. And in the next video, I will be installing SQL Server and configuring failover cluster on two nodes, SQL A and SQL B. Stay tuned for that. I hope you've enjoyed the video and thank you for watching.